The French Navy, officially the Marine Nationale and casually called La Royale, is the maritime arm of the French military. Tracing its roots back to 1624, it is one of the world's oldest naval forces and historically played a key part in establishing the French colonial empire. Since 2008, its roles have been defined as maintaining intelligence, protecting populations, preventing crises, intervening wherever necessary to re-establish peace, and dissuading any threats against vital French interests. The Marine Nationale consists of 4 branches: the Forces Navale, the Forces Sous-marines, the Aeronavale and the Fusiliers Marins. As a blue-water navy, the Marine Nationale operates a wide range of fighting vessels, including a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, nuclear-powered submarines, frigates, patrol boats and support ships. The French Navy does not use prefixes of the names of its ships. Foreign commentators sometimes used the prefixes FS, or FNS. These are not official, however. As of June 2014, the French Navy employs a total of 36,776 regular personnel. The reserve element of the French Navy consists of 5,519 personnel of the operational reserve and 2,909 personnel of the citizens' reserve. The motto of the Navy is honneur, patrie, valeur, discipline, and these words are found on the deck of every ship in the fleet. History. The French Navy is affectionately known as La Royale. The reason is not well known. Some theorize that it is for its traditional attachment to the French monarchy. Some others said that before being named Nationale the Navy had been named Royale, or simply because of the location of its headquarters, Rue Royale in Paris for the Arcade copyright my front sectionnaires, etc. The Navy did not sport the royal titles common with other European navies like the British Royal Navy, 17th, 18th, and early 19th centuries. The Navy became a consistent instrument of national power around the 17th century with Richelieu's efforts under Louis XIII, and Colbert's under Louis XIV. Under the tutelage of the Sun King, the French Navy was well financed and equipped, managing to score several early victories in the 9 Years' War against the Royal Navy and the Dutch Navy. Financial troubles, however, forced the Navy back to port and allowed the English and the Dutch to regain the initiative. Before the 9 Years' War, in the Franco-Dutch War, it managed to score a decisive victory over a combined Spanish-Dutch fleet at the Battle of Palermo. The 18th century saw the beginning of Royal Navy domination, which managed to inflict a number of significant defeats on the French. However, the French Navy continued to score various successes, as in the campaigns led in the Atlantic by Piquet de la Motte. In 1766, Bougainville led the first French circumnavigation. During the American Revolutionary War, the French Navy played a decisive role in supporting the Americans. In a very impressive effort, the French under de Grasse managed to defeat a British fleet at the Battle of the Chesapeake in 1781, thus ensuring that the Franco-American ground forces would win the ongoing Battle of Yorktown. French warships participated in the battle by bombarding British ground forces. In India, Suffren waged campaigns against the British, successfully contending for supremacy against Vice Admiral Sir Edward Hughes. On June 1, 1794, a fleet under Admiral Villaret Joyeuse fought the Third Battle of Ushant to prevent the Royal Navy from destroying a large convoy, inbound from the United States, that transported grain to the starving France. The convoy escaped unharmed and the sailors were paraded in triumph in the streets of Paris, though the losses sustained during the battle would prove crippling in the following years and ensure the domination of the Royal Navy. In the Mediterranean, the French Navy waged a naval campaign during a 1798 French invasion of Egypt. Evading a pursuing British fleet under the command of Admiral Horatio Nelson, French fleet, consisting of hundreds of ships and carrying 30,000 troops, captured Malta before continuing to Egypt, where the French took Alexandria. French troops subsequently marched inland while the fleet anchored in Abercur Bay. When Nelson discovered the French fleet's location, he set sail for Abercur Bay and ordered an immediate attack. In the subsequent Battle of the Nile, the French were defeated, ending French naval power in the Mediterranean and encouraging other nations to join the Second Coalition and go to war with France. From 1798 to 1800, France and the United States engaged in the Quasi-War, an undeclared naval war. Prior to the war, France had been outraged over U.S. trade with Britain and the refusal to repay war debts from the Revolution on grounds that they were owed to the French crown, not revolutionary France. French ships began seizing American merchant ships trading with Britain, inflicting substantial losses on American shipping. As a result, the United States Navy fought a series of largely successful naval engagements with the French. By the autumn of 1800, the U.S. Navy and Royal Navy had reduced the activities of French privateers and warships. The French Revolution, in eliminating numerous officers of noble lineage, all but crippled the French Navy. Efforts to make it into a powerful force under Napoleon I were dashed by the death of L'État Copyrighteville in 1804, and the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805, where the British all but annihilated a combined Franco-Spanish fleet. The disaster guaranteed British naval superiority throughout the Napoleonic Wars, and up until World War II. The French Navy proved vastly inferior in tactics to the Royal Navy throughout the Napoleonic Wars. The French Navy, even with the help of Allied navies, was smaller. In 1812, the Royal Navy, consisting of 600 cruisers and some smaller vessels, was the size of the rest of the world's navies combined. During the Napoleonic Wars, most of its engagements with the British ended in defeat. Between 1793 and 1812, the French Navy lost 377 ships to the British, while the British lost 10 ships. In 14 major engagements between 1794 and 1806, the French Navy suffered 23,000 casualties while the Royal Navy suffered 7,000 casualties. 1 in 4 British casualties were deaths, while more than half the French were. The lopsided casualty figures were due to the fact that the French sought to disable and capture enemy ships, while the British sought to kill or injure enemy gun crews. French gunners were told to fire as the ship began its uproll, and shoot high to disable the masts, spars, and rigging. British gun crews were taught to fire on the downroll, and to fire straight at the hull. The French Navy was unable to prevent a British naval blockade of France during the Napoleonic Wars, and spent much of the war blockaded in port. 19th century revival, restoration and July monarchy. During the Bourbon Restoration, the Navy at first suffered from the compounded damage sustained during the French Revolutionary Wars and the Napoleonic Wars, and from the incompetence and dereliction of the Royalist officer corps, as epitomized by the disaster of the frigate Mar Copyright and her proverbial raft of the Medusa. Soon, however, the Navy started to restore, under the impulsion of veterans of the Napoleonic Wars like Guy-Victor Duprat Copyright, Charles Bourdin or Alban Roussin. Adequate leadership was compounded with well-financed constructions, notably with large two-decker cruiser frigates and innovative ship-of-the-line designs, and sustained efforts of modernization. Artillery standardized on the 30-pound caliber and later experimentation with Paxton's guns, while navigation saw the introduction of the first steamers with the corvette Sphinx. On June 14, 1830, a large fleet under Duprat Copyright, comprising 103 warships and 464 transports, executed the invasion of Algiers, landing an army at Sidi Farach. Sultan Khalesi, the main fort defending the city, was attacked on June 29 and fell on July 4. The Bey then started negotiations, leading to his capitulation the next day. This action saw the first practical deployment of military steamers, then used to tow ships of the line to their optimal firing position. The next year, after the Revolution of July, a fleet under Rear Admiral Roussin conducted a show of force against the absolutist Miguel I of Portugal at the Battle of the Tagus, and strong-armed him into signing a humiliating agreement by sailing on the river into his very capital and seizing his fleet. In 1838, the Navy conducted another display of force following failed diplomatic démarches, with the Pastry War in Mexico. A small frigate squadron under Bourdin bombarded and silenced the defenses of Fort San Juan de Ulloa at the Battle of Veracruz. This action, where steamers were again used as tugs, marked the first deployment of Paxton's guns, to great effect which did not go unnoticed by observers from the United Kingdom and the United States. In 1842, the French Navy took over Tahiti under Admiral Abel Aubert du Petit-Thras. French activity in those parts would continue throughout the 19th century, as his nephew Abel Nicolas Bergas du Petit-Thras went on pacifying the Marquises Islands in 1880. In August 1844, a French squadron of French Navy under the Prince de Joinville attacked the Moroccan city of Mogador, modern Essaouira, and the island facing the city, Mogador Island. The campaign was part of the First Franco-Moroccan War. Second Empire. In a speech in 1852, Napoleon III famously proclaimed that the empire means peace, but actually he was thoroughly determined to follow a strong foreign policy to extend France's power and glory. Around that time, the French Navy was involved in a multitude of actions around the world. Conquest of Cochinchina. Napoleon III took the first steps to establishing a French colonial influence in Indochina. He approved the launching of the Cochinchina campaign in 1858 to punish the Vietnamese for their mistreatment of French Catholic missionaries and force the court to accept a French presence in the country. An important factor in his decision was the belief that France risked becoming a second-rate power by not expanding its influence in East Asia. Also, the idea that France had a civilizing mission was spreading. This eventually led to a full-out invasion in 1861. By 1862 the war was over and Vietnam conceded 3 provinces in the south, called by the French Cochinchina, opened 3 ports to French trade, allowed free passage of French warships to Cambodia, allowed freedom of action for French missionaries and gave France a large indemnity for the cost of the war. The Crimean War. Napoleon III's challenge to Russia's claims to influence in the Ottoman Empire led to France's successful participation in the Crimean War. During this war Napoleon successfully established a French alliance with Britain, which continued after the war's close. Second Opium War. In China, France took part in the Second Opium War along with Britain, and in 1860 French troops entered Beijing. China was forced to concede more trading rights, allow freedom of navigation of the Yangtze River, give full civil rights and freedom of religion to Christians, and give France and Britain a huge indemnity. This combined with the intervention in Vietnam set the stage for further French influence in China leading up to a sphere of influence over parts of southern China. Mexico. The French Navy conducted a successful blockade of Mexico in the Pastry War of 1838. It was then heavily involved in French intervention in Mexico. Napoleon III, using as a pretext the Mexican Republic's refusal to pay its foreign debts, planned to establish a French sphere of influence in North America by creating a French-backed monarchy in Mexico, a project which was supported by Mexican conservatives tired of the anti-clerical Mexican Republic. Korea, Japan. In 1866, French naval troops took part in the French campaign against Korea. The French Navy also had a significant presence in Japan with the bombardment of Shimonoseki in 1863. In 1867–1868, some level of presence in Japan was maintained around the actions of French military mission to Japan, and the subsequent Boshin War. Franco-Prussian War. At the outset of the Franco-Prussian War in 1870, the 470-ship French Navy imposed a blockade of the North German coastline, which the Germans never managed to lift. However, the French ships began suffering coal shortages and lacked the necessary weaponry to deal with the coastal defenses around major enemy ports. A planned invasion of northern Germany was scuttled after the Marines and naval infantry tasked with the invasion were dispatched for land combat. After most of the professional army was captured in 2 major French defeats, naval officers were taken from their ships to officer reserve units. The blockade became less effective as autumn storms took their toll on the French ships still enforcing the blockade. In September 1870, the blockade was abandoned for the winter. Isolated engagements between French and German ships also took place in other theaters. Third Republic, Sino-French War. The projection of French naval power in the Far East reached a peak in the first half of the 1880s. The Far East Squadron, an exceptional naval grouping of 2 naval divisions under the command of Admiral Armour Copyright Dow Copyright Ecorbit created for the duration of the Sino-French War, saw considerable action during the war along the China coast and in the seas around Formosa. Besides almost obliterating China's Fujian fleet at the Battle of Tso, the squadron took part in the bombardment and landings at Keelung and Tanzhui, the blockade of Formosa, the Battle of Shipu, the so-called Battle of Xinhai, the Pescadores Campaign and the Rice blockade of the Yangtze River. 19th-century technological innovations. In the 19th century, the Navy recovered and became arguably the second finest in the world after the Royal Navy, albeit very much smaller. The French Navy, eager to challenge British naval supremacy, took a leadership role in many areas of warship development, with the introduction of new technologies. France led the development of shell guns for the Navy, with its invention Pexon's gun by Henri-Joseph Pexons. In 1850, Le Napoleon copyright on became the first steam-powered battleship in history. L'Aigle became the first seagoing ironclad in history when she was launched in 1859. In 1863, the French Navy launched Plongeur, the first submarine in the world to be propelled by mechanical power. In 1876, the Redoutable became the first steel-hulled warship ever. In 1887, the Dupuy de Lumey became the world's first armored cruiser. The French Navy also became an active proponent of the Juniper-Melcol doctrine, calling for small but powerful warships using torpedoes and shell guns to attack the British fleet. French warship construction proved attractive to the newly industrializing Japan, when the French engineer Epermel Bertin was invited to assist in warship design for the Imperial Japanese Navy. 20th century, the development of the French Navy slowed down in the beginning of 20th century as the naval arms race between Germany and Great Britain grew in intensity. As a result, it was outnumbered not only by the Royal Navy but also by the Imperial German Navy and United States Navy, which were also technically superior. It was late to introduce new battleships, Euro dreadnoughts and light cruisers, and it entered World War I with relatively few modern vessels. The Entente Cordiale ended the period in which Britain was seen as a potential enemy, reducing the need for a strong navy. Although there was no formal military alliance, there was a de facto agreement that France would play a leading role in the Mediterranean and Britain would protect the northern coast of France against a possible German attack. During the war, few warships were built because the main French effort was on land. The first task of the Mediterranean battle squadrons was to escort transport ships carrying troops from French North Africa to France to join the Battle of the Marne. By the end of August 1914, French battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and submarines were conducting patrols in the Adriatic Sea to prevent any attacks by the Austro-Hungarian Navy. The most important operations of the French Navy were conducted during the Dardanelles campaign. The French Navy also played an important role in countering Germany's U-boat campaign, with warships patrolling the seas and escorting convoys. In December 1916, French warships arrived off Greece, bombarding Athens and landing sailors, forcing the pro-German Greek government to change its policies. A number of Greek Navy warships were seized and commissioned into the French Navy, and later played an important part in the anti-U-boat campaign. The most significant losses sustained by the French Navy during the war were 3 pre-dreadnought battleships, 1 semi-dreadnought, 4 armored cruisers, 1 protected cruiser, 12 destroyers, and 14 submarines. Listed below is a number of major ships of the French Navy at the outbreak of World War I in 1914 and the end of World War I in 1918. The first figure represents the outbreak and the second figure in brackets represents the end of WWI. Dreadnought battleships, 4, pre-dreadnought battleships, 17, armored cruisers, 22, protected cruisers, 13, destroyers, 35, torpedo boats, 180, submarines, 50, the first proto-aircraft carrier. The invention of the seaplane in 1910 with the French Faber Hydravion led to the earliest development of ships designed to carry airplanes, albeit equipped with floats. In 1911, the first such vessel appeared in the French Navy, La Fauda. She was the world's first seaplane carrier. She was commissioned as a seaplane tender, and carried float-equipped planes in hangars on the main deck, from where they were lowered on the sea with a crane. La Fauda was further modified in November 1913 with a 10-meter flat deck to launch her seaplanes. in spite of proposals of the French inventor Claire Copyright Mentadeur in 1909 to build a ship with a flat deck to operate aeroplanes at sea, similar to modern aircraft carriers. The French Navy built its first aircraft carrier only in the 1920s and did not go further in developing aircraft carriers before World War II. In 1920, Paul Test achieved the first carrier landing of the history of the French Navy, aboard the Bar Copyright Arn. Fleet construction between the World Wars. After World War I, the French Navy remained the fourth largest in the world, after the British, US and Japanese navies, but the Italian Navy, considered as the main enemy, was almost as large as the French one. This order of fleets, with the French Navy equal to the Italian Navy, was sanctioned by the 1922 Washington Naval Treaty. Every naval fleet consisted of a variety of ships of different sizes, and no fleet had enough resources to make every vessel supreme in its class. Nonetheless, different countries strove to excel in particular classes. Between the World Wars, the French fleet was remarkable in its building of small numbers of ships that were over the top with relation to their equivalents of other powers. For example, the French chose to build super-destroyers, which were deemed during the Second World War by the Allies as the equivalent of light cruisers. The Fantask class of destroyer is still the world's fastest class of destroyer. The Surcouf submarine was the largest and most powerful of its day. The Dunkirk-class battleships, designed specially to fight the German so-called pocket battleships, were, in spite of their relatively small size, very well-balanced designs and precursors of a new fast battleship generation in the world. The Richelieu-class full-size battleships are considered by some experts as the most successful battleships built under displacement limits of Washington Treaty in the world. Major ships of the French Navy at the beginning of the German attack in May 1940, modern battleships, 3, old dreadnought battleships, 5, aircraft carriers, 1, seaplane carriers, 1, heavy cruisers, 7 light cruisers, 11, heavy destroyers, 32, destroyers, 38, submarines, 80, sloops, 65. Second World War. At the outset of the war, the French Navy was involved in a number of operations against the Axis powers, participating in the Battle of the Atlantic, the Allied campaign in Norway, the Dunkirk evacuation and, briefly, the Battle of the Mediterranean. However, Par Copyright armistice terms completely changed the situation. The French fleet immediately withdrew from the fight. The British perceived the French fleet under the Vichy government as a potentially lethal threat. This threat would be made all the more real should the French somehow become formal enemies or, more likely, should the Kriegsmarine gain control of French ships. It was deemed essential that the French Navy be put out of action. Some vessels were in port in France, while others escaped to Britain or British-controlled Egypt. The British boarded all French ships in their hands, with many sailors rejoining the Allies as part of the Free French Navy because of General de Gaulle's unregistered trademark's growing influence. Although the boardings were conducted relatively peacefully, there was resistance on Surcouf, then the largest submarine in the world, resulting in a skirmish in which 1 French and 3 British naval personnel were killed. However, the most powerful concentration of the French fleet remained in Mers-el-Kar copyright Ber or Dakar. A Royal Navy squadron delivered an ultimatum to the French fleet at Mers-el-Kar copyright Ber. The ultimatum demanded that the ships and their crews either join the war effort or sail with reduced crews to a British port, promising that the ships would be repatriated at the end of the war or compensation paid for damages to them, and giving them the option of sailing to a French port in the West Indies where they could be demilitarized or temporarily given to the United States until the end of the war. If the French refused these offers, they had to scuttle their ships or be fired on. On July 3, 1940, the British opened fire after an agreement proved impossible. 1 French battleship was sunk, and 2 battleships and 4 destroyers were knocked out. A British submarine also sank and a Viso. 6 British naval aircraft were shot down. A total of 1,297 French sailors and 2 British airmen were killed. Though the Free French naval forces continued to fight alongside the Allies, the rest of the French fleet became hostile as a result of this action. Many senior members of the French Navy considered Britain and France effectively at war. The French Air Force repeatedly bombed Gibraltar, and throughout the war, there were instances where the French Navy came close to engaging the Royal Navy. In November 1942, for example, Admiral Jean de Laborde refused to use the remainder of the French Navy to support Operation Torch, arguing that French ships should instead be attacking the British and Americans. In September, an attempt to take Vichy-held Dakar ended with the Battle of Dakar and a victory for the Vichy forces. In addition, the Allied attack on Dakar led directly to the Vichy bombing of Gibraltar. These actions soured Anglo-French relations, but did not inhibit further defections to the Allies. The subsequent Battle of Gabon, the Syria-Lebanon campaign, and the Battle of Madagascar ended in Vichy defeats. During Operation Torch in November 1942, the Allies invaded French North Africa, leading to a large naval battle at Casablanca, but the Vichy forces quickly turned sides. In response, the Germans launched Casey Anton and occupied the Vichy-held portion of metropolitan France. The German occupation included the French naval port of Toulon where a large portion of the surviving French fleet lay. This was a major German objective and forces under SS command had been detailed to capture them. This eventually resulted in French sailors sinking their own ships to save them from falling into German hands. No French capital ships and few others were taken in reparable condition. A few ships fled Toulon and joined the Allies. 5 submarines tried to escape. 3 of them were successful, the Casabianca, Gloire and Marsouin. Following Torch, remnants of the French Navy moved to the Allies, including ships interned in Egypt, and then there were FNFL warships supporting the Allied landings in Normandy and southern France. The conquest of the European harbours put an end to the combat operations of the Navy, which spent the rest of the war clearing mines and repairing port installations. On the Pacific theatre, the French Navy was present until the Japanese capitulation. Richelieu was present at the Japanese instrument of surrender. At the end of the war, the weight of the French Navy was 400,000 tons. Organization. The Chief of the Naval Staff is Vice-Admiral Unregistered trademark Escadron Ordre d'État copyright, and as of 2014 the Navy has an active strength of 36,776 military personnel and 2,909 civilian staff. The Navy is organized into 4 main operational branches, the Force d'Action Navale, the Surface Fleet, the Forces Sous-marines, nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines and fleet submarines, the Aviation Navale, ground and sea-based aircraft, the Fusiliers Marins, naval infantry including the Commandos de Marine. In addition, the National Gendarmerie of France maintain a maritime force of patrol boats that falls under the operational command of the French Navy, the Gendarmerie Maritime, the Coast Guard of France. Main naval bases, as of 2014, major naval bases in USA, Toulon, Brest, Éolong and Cherbourg in metropolitan France. Fort de France, de Grade des Cannes, Port des Galettes, Numa Copyright A and Puppet at overseas departments and territories. As well as bases in foreign countries such as Abu Dhabi, Dakar and Djibouti. Equipment. Ships and submarines. Although French naval doctrine calls for 2 aircraft carriers, as of 2014 the French only have 1, the Charles de Gaulle. Originally a planned order for the future French aircraft carrier was based on the design of the British Queen Elizabeth-class aircraft carriers currently under construction for the Royal Navy. However, the French program had been delayed several times for budgetary reasons and the result was priority being given to the more exportable FREMM project. In April 2013 it was confirmed that the second aircraft carrier project would be abandoned due to defense cuts announced in the 2013 French White Paper on Defense and National Security. The French Navy operates 3 amphibious assault ships, 1 amphibious transport dock, 2 air defense frigates, 7 anti-submarine frigates and 6 fleet submarines. This constitutes the French Navy a Euro unregistered trademark S main ocean-going warfighting forces. In addition, the French Navy operates 5 light frigates, 6 light surveillance frigates and 9 avisos. They undertake the Navy a Euro unregistered trademark S offshore patrol combat duties, the protection of French naval bases in territorial waters, and can also provide low-end escort capabilities to any ocean-going task force. The 4 ballistic missile submarines of the Navy's Strategic Oceanic Force provide the backbone of the French nuclear deterrent. Aircraft. The French naval aviation is officially known as the copyright Aeronavale and was created on 19 June 1998 with the merging of naval patrol aircraft and aircraft carrier squadrons. It has a strength of around 6,800 civilian and military personnel operating from 4 airbases in metropolitan France. The copyright Aeronavale is currently in the process of modernization with a total order of 48 Rafale multi-role fighters on order. 40 have so far been delivered and operate from the aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle. Customs and traditions, ranks. The rank insignia of the French Navy are worn on shoulder straps of shirts and white jackets, and on sleeves for navy jackets and mantles. Until 2005, only commissioned officers had an anchor on their insignia, but enlisted personnel are now receiving them as well. Commanding officers have titles of capitaine, but are called commandant. The 2 highest ranks, vice-amiral d'escadre and amiral, are functions, rather than ranks. They are assumed by officers ranking vice-amiral. The only amiral de la flotte was René Sectionnoir d'Arlan after he was refused the dignity of Admiral of France. Equivalent to the dignity of Marshal of France, the rank of Admiral of France remains theoretical in the Fifth Republic. It was last granted in 1869, during the Second Empire, but retained during the Third Republic until the death of its bearer in 1873. The title of Amiral de la Flotte was created so that Darlan would not have an inferior rank than his counterpart in the British Royal Navy, who had the rank of Admiral of the Fleet. Addressing officers, unlike in the French Army and Air Force, one does not prepend mon to the name of the rank when addressing an officer. Addressing a French Navy lieutenant de vaisseau with a mon capitaine will attract the traditional answer dans la marine il y a mon dieu et mon col, par mon capitaine. Uniforms. Future. France's financial problems have affected all branches of her military. The 2013 French White Paper on Defense and National Security cancelled the long-planned new aircraft carrier and a possible 4th Mistral-class assault ship, and conceded that British help would be needed to sustain an enduring presence. The backbone of the fleet will be the Aquitaine-class FREMM anti-submarine frigates, replacing the Georges Lakes class, but plans to buy a possible 17 FREMMs have been cut back to 8. The cancellation of the 3rd and 4th Horizon destroyers mean that the last 2 FREMM hulls may be fitted out as Freda air defense ships to replace the Cassard class. DCNS has shown a FREMM concept to meet this requirement, emphasizing ballistic missile defense with the Thales Seafire 500 AESA radar. On January 9, 2014 it was announced that the 2 remaining batteries in French service would be replaced in 2015/16 by 3 1,500-ton Bar-Saint-Timons multi-mission at a cost of a 100 M. DCNS has funded the construction of the Gowind-class corvette Le Droit and loaned her to the MN for fishery patrols to support an overseas marketing campaign for the design. At Euronaval 2010 DCNS showed a 30,000 T concept called the Brave-class replenishment and support ship to replace the Durance-class. Construction has started on the first of 6 Barracuda-class nuclear attack submarines. Commissioning of the Suffren is planned for 2017. The first MM-40 Exocet Block 3 missile was test-fired in 2010 to be produced. Naval versions of the Scalp EG land attack cruise missile are under development, along with a planned Aster Block 1 NT with greater capabilities against ballistic missiles. Notable French naval officers: Cassez, Vice Admiral Ducasse, Vice Admiral du Guitrelin, Rear Admiral Jean Bart, Rear Admiral Pierre Bouvet, Captain Cassard, Captain Surcouf, Captain Thirot. Heroes of the First Republic: Vice Admiral de la Tâche Copyright Ville, Vice Admiral de Villaret-Joyeuse, Vice Admiral Bruix, Rear Admiral du Chaillu, Captain du Petit-Thras, Captain Casabianca. Explorers: Vice Admiral Bougainville, Rear Admiral d'Entrexto, Rear Admiral Dumont d'Urville, Commodore Lapa. Copyright Rouse, Captain Samuel de Champlain, Captain d'Iberville, Captain Nicolas Bourdin, Captain Louis de Freycinet, Commander d'Arc de l'Aigre. Copyright E. Lieutenant Francis Garnier, Lieutenant Sauveur de Brazza. Other important French naval officers: Admiral Florent de Varennes, First Admiral of France; Admiral Jean de Vianney, Admiral of the French fleet during the Hundred Years' War; Admiral d'Estaing, Admiral of the French fleet which helped the United States secure independence; Admiral de Grasse, Commander of the French fleet at Chesapeake Bay during the American Revolutionary War; Admiral Courbet, Vice Admiral Tourville, Commander of the French fleet at the Battle of Beachy Head; Vice Admiral Villeneuve, Commander of the French and Spanish fleets at the Battle of Trafalgar; Vice Admiral Duquesne, Commander of the French fleet at the Battle of Aosta; Lieutenant Commander Paul Teste, pioneer of the modern aeronaval operations. Notable people who served in the French Navy: Marcel Cerdan, world boxing champion during the 40s; Jean Cocteau, poet, novelist, dramatist, designer, playwright, artist and filmmaker; Jacques-Yves Cousteau, Philippe de Gaulle, the son of the General Charles de Gaulle; Alain Delon, actor, served as a Fusilier Marin in the First Indochina War; Bob Daynard, a mercenary notorious for coup attempts and wars in Africa; Jean Gabin, another major French actor, he joined the Free French Naval Force during the Second World War; Paul Gauguin, painter, sculptor, printmaker, ceramist, and writer; Bernard Giraudot, actor, film director, scriptwriter, producer and writer; Albert II, Prince of Monaco; Reserve Lieutenant Commander Pierre Loti, mostly known for his literary works; Michel Serres, philosopher and author; Eric Tabali, a famous yachtsman; Hugo Nissu, a famous 19th-century novelist; Paul-Émile Victor, an ethnologist and polar explorer. Gallery. See also: List of naval ministers of France, category, Naval ships of France, List of battleships of France, French Navy admirals, French Navy officers, French 100 mm naval gun, Exocet, Far East Squadron, standing French Navy deployments, notes. References. Further reading: Randier, Jean. La Royale, l'histoire illustre. Copyright E de la Marine nationale française section es. ISBN A978-2-35261-022-9. Maria Petringa, Brazza, A Life for Africa, Bloomington, Indiana, Author House, 2006. ISBN 978-1-4259-1198-0. A biography of French naval officer, explorer of Africa, and human rights activist Pierre Sauveur de Brazza, including a detailed description of his years on the training ship Border, and his experiences at the French Ministry of the Navy on Rue Royale, in Paris. External links: English, Marine Nationale official site; English, French Navy 2011 guidebook; English, French Navy 2011 information file; English, Net Marine a well-documented database on French Navy. French, Mer and Marine main website on French maritime affairs; French, à la bord qui French Navy; English, pictorial feature on the period 1850 1916. From BigBadBattleships.com, lavishly illustrated. English, French Fleet Air Arm, about French naval aviation. English, French Navy in World War I, including warship losses.